Hello everybody, and welcome to the first Friday live for I think it's about 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks. And as you probably all know, I've taken a little bit of a break. Got a bit run down and tired, but then I also got ill. So what was meant to be a 2 or 3 week break ended up being a bit longer, but not to worry, we're back. So today we're just going to do a wipeout start because one of the things that I find that I feel that people do too much is when you come to doing a painting, the first thing you do is draw in the outlines, and that can work unless you have a problem seeing shapes of values. Because basically what makes paintings work, oil paintings, realistic oil paintings, is the value shapes. And if you can't see those, or you have trouble focusing on those, and you tend to see things instead of light and shadow shapes, your paintings are likely to be, one, a bit less realistic, and two, a little bit less expressive and a little bit less poetic. So today we are going to be doing a wipeout of this white squash. Now, I've chosen this white squash because it's in a way, it's quite a simple subject. I mean, anything can be as complicated as you like in painting if you want to make it that way. But it's all one color. It's very light, which makes it easier to see the light and shadow shapes. And it's been deliberately photographed so that there are clear areas of light and shadow, okay? So the way you do a wipeout basically is you cover your panel with a layer of paint. Smooth panels are best for this, because if you have a lot of texture, if it's like a canvas, or even worse, if you have a lot of texture and it's an absorbent surface like oil painting paper, you'll have trouble lifting the paint. It's a little bit like, you can use the same process with paper and charcoal. So you can make a load of charcoal dust by crumbling up some charcoal into powder, wipe it over the paper, and then use a rubber to wipe out the lights. That gives you basically the same thing. And the whole point of it is to help you see in terms of masses and not outlines and things, okay? Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you. It's good to be back. It's been a long time. And I've missed my Fridays too. So let's just get started. We'll switch over to the easel. So here I've got an 8x10 ampersand panel. You can see the reference photo I've got up there as well. So the first thing we need to do is to cover this with paint. But even before we do that, what I'm going to do is in here, in my little vase thing, jar, I've got a little bit of linseed oil. I use this at the moment. And I've got a small amount of solvent in it as well. I use this. I know a lot of people don't like terps, but if you don't use very much, it's fine. Or you can use OMS or whatever else you like. Some kind of solvent anyway. So that's probably like 9/10 oil and then about, a 1/10 solvent, something like that. And here I've got a makeup sponge, which, as you can see, has seen some use. It hasn't seen any makeup ever in its life. Dip it in the oil, wipe it off, and then I'm going to use that to put the oil on the panel. You don't have to use a makeup sponge for this. You can use a brush or anything else. A makeup sponge is just nice because you get a nice even covering. It should be slightly better light. I'm just rearranging my lights a little bit. I'm out of practice, you see. It's been too long. When you're on a roll with these things, and I was doing them like weekly for well, a long time. Everything is already set up and ready to go, but one of the things that caught me out today is that, because I haven't done one for like 6 weeks or something, everything slowly gets moved around. It would be interesting to see a time lapse of someone's studio, right, and see how things move around in the studio over time. So I'm wiping it back now. The reason I'm wiping it back is because I want a thin layer. I don't want it to be thick, gloopy oil on there. Hello, Gabriel. Good to see you. This must be your first live session then. You can have a look, if you have a look in the live tab on my YouTube channel, you can see all the previous live streams, of which there are many. Now I'm going to use lead white, but you can use titanium just as easily for this. One good thing about lead white is that it dries quickly. So if you do a wipeout with lead white, the next day you can paint over it. With titanium white, well, maybe not so much, might take a little bit longer. So this is raw umber. This is Michael Harding raw umber. Raw umber is one of the most variable tube paints out there, I've found. Every one you get from everybody, every different manufacturer, paint maker, can be really quite different. Ivory black. Don't see so much variation in those. Hello, Diane. Good to see you. Hello, Sylvie. And thank you, everybody, for coming back. You know, it's very nice to see that you're all still with me and wanting to come back and do some painting. Let me know in the chat today if you're painting along or if you're just watching. Hello, Marjolaine. Good to see you. Yeah, Christine, thanks. I'm much better now. I've still got this annoying cough that I just can't seem to shake. But pretty much back to normal apart from that. And looking forward to doing a bunch more Fridays. So this is the Munsell value scale. Link for this is in the description. You can get it off eBay. It's like $10 and probably the best $10 you'll ever spend if you're a painter. Outrageously useful. Really nice value scale. Any value scale will work. What's different about this one though is that these are perceptually equal changes in value. The other thing that's nice about this is it's laminated, so you can put paint on it so you can check your values. So I'm going to start off with some white. Probably not that much. I'm going to put in some raw umber. So the rule with a wipeout is that you're not allowed to do light values, make your values lighter with white paint. Okay, once you've put the paint on, you're only allowed to paint darker shadow shapes in. You have to wipe out the lights. The reason for that is because the reason I say that anyway is, one, you will find that the wiped out areas have a very different kind of a visual quality. Now I'm going to need more than that, than the areas that you've painted with white paint. Need to make sure we've got plenty of this, enough to cover the panel. And the value I'm mixing here is like a middle value. Like if I got my value scale, if you wanted to check it on your value scale, you'd be looking for about a value 5. It doesn't matter if it's exactly that. So this is a middle value, value 5. Like what have I got here? I'm a little bit dark, so mine is like a 4.5. But that's fine, it doesn't matter. So yeah, the problems with painting into a wipeout with white paint to add your lights is that firstly those areas will look very, very different than the wiped out areas, and it will hurt the visual cohesiveness of the painting. And secondly, it will allow you to go back into painting as you normally would without thinking about just the shapes. Okay, so no outlines allowed today. It's the law, just for today. So I've got a gob of paint there, that's about a value 5, something like that. I'm going to cover the panel with it. What shall I use today for this? I generally use biggish brushes for this because I want it covered and I also want lots of texture. This will do nicely. This is, you can use any brush. This is a Rosemary's long flat bristle. It's a bit damaged. It's got paint like right down to the ferrule. It's one of the few brushes that I haven't looked after very well. So, you know, it's a bit of a state, frankly. just what we want. I'm going to dip it in a bit of oil, wipe the oil off. I do this just to work in the brush, so you're not dealing with a completely dry brush. Pick up a load of this paint and I'm just going to scrub it all over the surface. What I don't want, I didn't even mix enough, look. Let's see if we can push it around and get it covered. What I don't want is a really perfectly smooth finish with this. I want brush strokes, I want life, I want a bit of texture in there, you know, it makes everything work better. Now in the reference photo for this, I've supplied a version of the reference photo with not exactly a grid, but a central vertical and a central horizontal. It's mostly because, I mean, I always think about paintings in that way, in any case. When I'm drawing things out, I always visualize things with a central vertical, a central horizontal, and relate everything to those. It's probably partly from doing quite a bit of size practice many years ago. Just helps to visualize where things go. Just whack it on there. Don't be too precious about it. But you want to make sure that it's kind of, you haven't got some areas that are a lot lighter or a lot darker, like in big patches. So you want a bit of variation across the surface like this. You know, this is quite brushy and textural, which is good because it will all end up as expression in the wipeout start. But it's reasonably even across the surface, right? Lady Loves Lindy, hello. First ever Foxton Friday, very cool. And you're also just down the road from me. I'm just up near Slimbridge. If you're in Bath, you're just down the way. Although I think the people who live in Bath call it Bath, but me being a northerner, I call it Bath. Oh, I think I just lost my stream for a minute there. Let me know in the chat if you can still see me okay. I think I just lost the stream for a second. It looks like what I'm sending out is fine, but it looked like it just kind of went down for a minute there and then suddenly came back. Let me know if you had any interruption or not. YouTube's been a bit less stable lately, I think. Not as good as it used to be. Yes, still here, everybody says. Oh, it's just me then. Well, that's good. Okay, so look, I've got I've got my paper towel here. I just use kitchen roll for this, but you can use any number of different tools, anything you want. Let me take you quickly through the kind of things I like to use. I like to use this a lot because you can wipe out big areas with it, or you can twist it around and make little needles and do small outlines as well, small little shapes as well, small details too. These are good spatulas for pushing paint out of the way. And this is really useful, a small silicone paint shaper, which you can use to get a really hard edge where you want a hard edge. Most of the time we don't with this technique. The softness is part of the nice, the aesthetic effect that you get from working this way. Q-tips, or as we call them in the UK, cotton wool buds. Yeah, it went down for me for a couple of seconds, Julie. A ground on a couch. Yeah, it does. It does make, Corey says, I assume it helps make it a little bit more slippery for the wipeout to have a ground on a couch. It does. It does. It makes it a little bit easier to wipe the paint off. Hello, Kamlesh. Good to see you. I've had a busy old day today, actually. Just getting connected with the painting. Sometimes takes a little while. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with a wodge of paper towel is wipe out the light shape. Now, I do like to make a couple of little kind of reference points for how big the light shape is going to be. So, and the way you find this, the way you find your light shape is to get the reference, or if you're working from life, which is another good way to do it, to look at your subject and to squint right down. Squint right down. So if I imagine a horizontal along the middle of the painting, I'm trying to figure out like how far across would the light shape cross that horizontal, right? So I'm not actually putting a grid onto the surface of the panel, and I'm not drawing any outlines, but it's not quite halfway between here and here, right, the edge of the panel. It's a little bit less than halfway, so that's about halfway, so it's going to be probably about there. Just gives me a reference point. Now, I've shot this fairly central, so it should be fairly, or at least let's say less difficult in some ways to figure out the position of this light shape. So then I want to know, I'm just thinking about the light shape, so then I want to know how far down it comes, right? Pretty much exactly halfway down. If you imagine that there was a vertical grid line there, I like to visualize it, you know, and you imagine that there's a horizontal there, it would be about halfway down the bottom of the painting. So it's going to come down to about there. It helps if you can visualize where things go. I personally think that visualizing things is a really important part of the skill of drawing, especially if you're kind of eyeballing. Now on the right hand side, it's a little bit to the right of the center, and it comes probably about 2/3 of the way up between what would be the center of the panel and the top, so it's probably going to come up to about here. Something like that. And the easiest thing, I mean, what hits me most next about what I want to be looking at to find its position is there's a strong diagonal that comes from this point here, the furthest right point, up to the top. So if I can imagine that angle, visualize that angle and get it in something like right, and I can start to wipe out this area here. I've gone a little bit too far to the right with that look. To use my brush and smooth it out. You can add back in to kind of correct things. And then from here, we're like up this way. So this is almost like if you've done any straight line blocking practice with drawing shapes, it's a similar thing. I mean, I say you're not allowed to paint outlines, but that's because I want to encourage you, let's say, to think in terms of masses more. But if you do a lot of straight line blockings, then this is a very similar approach. You know, these are I'm kind of breaking it down to straight lines. When we get to the left-hand side though, I just want the light. I don't want the half tone, right? So you've got light, half tone, shadow. I just want the light shape. And it kind of goes up a little bit diagonally to the left like that. I mean, you're never going to get it exact because obviously it's a slow drop off of the light from the light into the halftone into the shadow. So you just try and get it somewhere close. We're just trying to get the shape. And it feels really different, doesn't it, right? I mean, if you've never done anything like this before. Now we need to be careful, right? Because we're going to create the stem and the area around the stem by wiping out what's around it. So we need to be a little bit careful here. I've probably overdone it here. I've gone a bit too, I'm going to add a little bit more back in there. So you've got the stem and then you've got the shadow. Now the stem is actually a light shape on its own. You know, it's the lovely thing about pumpkins or squashes, as we would probably call this one in the UK, is that they have, they're almost square, this one in particular. So, you know, it has a really clear division between the light and the shadow. It's going to be about here. It's just to the left of the center. I'm just going to put a little nub in where I think that's going to go. So if I'm sighting across like from the top of the light shape here, which is about there-ish, do I think that's about right? Maybe I'm a little bit low. I think probably I could do with being a little bit higher. Yeah, let's go a little bit higher with that. So when I'm correcting, like I'm not changing an outline, I'm still wiping out the shape, you know. Very different way of working. Hello, Jane. Jane's first ever Foxton Friday, and she's painting along. Well done. That's brilliant. Thank you, Kaz. Fridays haven't been the same for me either, but sometimes you just got to take a break. Hello, Robin. Good to see you. Hello, Stefan. Hi, Corey. Yeah, I mean, remember with this, like if I was doing this as a painting, I might not have it quite as central as this. This is like a study, an exercise, if you like, but we still want to try and make it kind of beautiful if we can. So I need to create the dent in the middle. So what's going to help me create these complicated light and shadow shapes over here, where you get the segments of the pumpkin kind of going into the middle, is if I establish that just double checking everything, checking this angle, trying to make sure it's right, and that I'm going high enough here. And because sighting across from the top of the light shape here on the right will give me pretty much lines up with the light shape of the light side of the stem where it's been cut off. So I'm going to say it's going to come down to about there-ish, just to the left of the center. It's going to be about there. You've kind of got to be a little bit courageous when you're working this way. The temptation is always to say, oh, I've got to really figure out where everything goes really carefully, or I'm going to mess it up. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will. And what happens if you do, like if you find out that it's in completely the wrong place? To paint over it and do it again. Like if I decided that was completely wrong, I'd just paint over it. Just push the paint over and then wipe it out again. You know, it's fine. This is, you've got a license to play, to try things out, give it a go and see. But it's a very, very different mental approach, let's say, than if you draw an outline first. And the reason that I love it so much, as I was saying at the beginning, this way of working, is that it stops you getting hung up on the outline of something. Like one of the problems, one of the most common problems that I see is people feeling that they need to paint an outline all the way around everything. Just gradually wiping out these shapes, figuring out the bits that I can, like where they go. Trying to get things in the right position. Because we don't actually see in outlines. We think in outlines, but we don't see in outlines. We see shapes of light and shadow. And also with something like this, you don't have a huge amount invested in it, really. I mean, you can spend an hour, 2 hours on something like this, just as an exercise. These panels aren't that expensive. It's an Ampersand Gessobord panel, the 8x10s, I can't remember how much they are, but just a few quid. But if you don't want to sacrifice the panel, you could spend an hour on this and then wipe it off. Keep the panel for something else and just use it as practice, you know. Trying to get those segments in, and you can see already like the shape is starting to come. I need to get a little bit more detailed here, so I'm going to get a little Q-tip out. Be a bit more careful because I want to get these in the right place. And then there's this kind of shadow area here. There's just a hint of a light, another segment there. But it's got texture, you know, already. It's got life. The very light parts we'll wipe in a little while. So for the half tone, I'm going to just really lightly, almost just dab. So I don't want to lose as much. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to get it in about the right place. I don't want to lift as much paint, so much lighter. More dabbing than anything else. Lighter pressure lifts less paint, and I can get a kind of a half tone in there. Hippopotamus Mosh, good point. Says, I made my own 20-step value scale and can confirm it's worth buying the pre-made scale from eBay. Yeah. But the other nice thing about this scale is that you can use it just to practice matching values. You know, so if you want to get better at eyeballing values, just get some paint, cheap paint like ivory black and titanium white, and match every second value. You know, match a 1, a 3, a 5, a 7, and a 9, and do that every day. It'll take you about half an hour maybe, and you'll get a lot quicker as you go, and then start doing every step in between that as well. So we also have, I'm going to need something smaller, so I'm going to use, actually I'll show you how I do this. So I'm going to twist this up to a point, because we've got a couple more light shapes in here. There's another segment over here that has light on it. So I'm squinting down, you know, because I don't want to overdo the light. I don't want to make this as light as this area here. And a bigger, slightly lighter one there. Didn't get the shape quite right of that one. But can you see how, I think I've gone a bit too far to the right maybe. Let's cut back into that a little bit. You can, I like to use synthetics for this. You can, so this is a smaller synthetic. So if I want to refine some of these shapes here, you know, I can do it like this. I'm still dealing with just with shape. But you can see how having these other little light parts here immediately makes it feel more like, I think I've actually made a mistake there. I've got 3 of these and there should only be 2. It makes it feel like there's form here, even though I haven't painted it in yet. Let's do that little bit again. So I want one here, leaving a little bit of dark space there. Let's bring this dark back over a little bit further as well. It still obviously does depend on like how good at eyeballing shape you are. So it's also very good practice for that. Cut that one down a little bit. Then I'll put that lighter one in again. I had 3 segments over here instead of 2. And it helps you to start thinking about the shapes between things. Feels like I'm not going quite far enough out. Further towards the left. It's just a suggestion of a light shape there. I'm going to do without lifting so much paint off, which will show us the shadow side of the stem. And actually this is be a good time to show you how you can use a silicone shaper, because this little paint shaper thing, because we've got hard edges on this stem here, so I can use this to create a hard edge, lift off a little bit more paint and make a hard edge there. And bring out the lights over here, so it allows you to lift off a lot more paint. Right on the edge, if I wanted a hard edge around the right, generally I try and avoid having too many hard edges in the piece, but around here, say we want a hard edge just against them, where the light part goes against the shadow. You can lean into it more to lift more paint off for the very lightest parts. And you can also, if you want to, get a little bit of solvent on your paper towel. Let's say I'm using Terps, which I know a lot of people don't like. So you could use, you know, whatever you're most comfortable with using, and that allows you to take off a little bit more. So I'm working a bit more kind of detail into the light area now. Create the shapes a bit more. Another nice thing you can do is if you've got, this is a soft synthetic brush. It's very nice for softening. So I'm going to lighten this area and soften it in a bit. Got this light goes up to here. Basically, any way you can find to lift paint off is fair game. Pushing a bit harder so I can get a lighter value all the way up here. So this is why I chose a white squash, because you can see a little bit more detail in the lights. If it was very strongly coloured like an orange pumpkin, it would be a lot harder to see the little changes in value. This is why, like in ateliers, they will often do sorry, I'm out of practice talking and painting at the same time. Cast drawings and cast paintings, because it's easier to see the lights and the shadows. On very light coloured objects. Hopefully it's becoming a bit more obvious now as I work through it a little bit more, how you can start to feel that there's form there, even though I haven't actually painted anything over on the left-hand side at all. And the lesson of that is that you don't need the outline on this side. You don't need it. In order to feel that there's something there, in order to feel that there's a form that you could almost reach out and touch. You don't need the light side. Sorry, you don't need the shadow side. I don't need to put this outline in. I'm going to take a little bit more off here. So you make the shadows basically by removing the lights. And there's also like the lighter shape of the tabletop here. So if I start to wipe that back, I'm going to use much lighter pressure here because I don't want it to get as light as this. And I'm also going to use the paper towel sideways so that I can kind of start to also suggest the grain of the tabletop a little bit. And this is how I'm going to make the cast shadow appear to be there without actually painting it, just by wiping back the tabletop. Oh. What I do a lot as well is I unfurl my paper towel and find a new clean bit. So I ended up putting some paint on there where I didn't want it because I used a bit of the paper towel that already had a lot of paint on it. So now you can feel that there's a kind of a shadow cast over here, even though I haven't painted it in, just from wiping out. And there's just a little bit, a very subtle reflection as well on this tabletop. So I'm going to wipe out those areas a little bit more. To correspond with where there's light up here. So the amount of pressure that you use with the cloth will determine how much paint you remove. And that determines how light it goes. As I say, it's very similar. You can do a very similar thing with charcoal. But you get more interesting textures with paint. Here she comes. It's starting to feel like there's something there, you know, it comes bit by bit. You need to be patient and just take your time. Try to make sure that you take the right amount of paint off to get the value you want in each part. A bit more lighter value up here. And like anything, it takes practice. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But the real value of it, as I say, is getting to think differently, to think in terms of light and shadow shapes, instead of painting an outline and then colouring it in. I'm not saying that that won't work. You know, you can work that way. But this is a way of helping you to see differently. Need a bit more paint in there, actually. So at the moment, it's ostensibly a two value study, really. I think I actually ended up going a bit too high here. What do you think? I think I've gone too high with this bit here. And that, I cut it back down a bit. It feels like that's a little bit too high. Or it might be, maybe it's not so bad. It's very easy to, at this stage with the wipeout as well, it's very easy to change. You know, in a lot of ways, it's easier to change the drawing than if you've done a really careful drawing with line. You're kind of less invested in it. You can play with it a little bit more. You can bring this further out or push it back in again by putting more of the paint back in. And you can also make harder edges by cutting in, like this. The only thing about doing this is you lose some of that kind of lovely textural brushiness, you know, that you get when you've just wiped out the light area. Hello, Steve. Good to see you too. If the sound is cutting out, it might not. I mean, if it's actually cutting my words out mid-word, then it's definitely something going on. I think it's all right here. But also I do have what they call a noise gate on the mic, so that when I stop speaking, it will go completely silent. And inevitably I do every now and again. I think this angle is a bit too steep, so I'm going to take this a bit further out on the right hand side. It's a slow, almost like a kind of a meditative process, gradually building up. But it's much easier to think like, you know, if I'm looking at this shape here, this big light shape from this side up to about here, you know, it's much easier to be looking at the shape of that against the reference. If I'm just dealing with shape, it makes that, in a lot of ways, I think you can end up with more accuracy this way. And it's the accuracy of the shape that you're thinking about, rather than thinking, oh, maybe this line is in the wrong place. Bring this highlight up here a little bit. And working into it a little bit more to get some of the variation in the values. Oh, I do love a wipeout. And what's nice, like on this shape here, it's almost flat onto us, but if you looked at it from the top in section, it would be going like that. So there's a little bit of a slight change in direction just here before we hit the shadow part, where it turns towards the light. So I'm just gonna show that plane change with it, wiping out a lighter value down here. Another reason I really love painting squashes and pumpkins is the the shapes are so clear, you know, they're a bit like lemons. The changes in plane are so clear. They're very satisfying to paint. I'm going to soften this one because it's standing out a bit too much. So this is just a dry brush, a dry synthetic brush. You can soften the edges of things, just the same as you would in a painting. And this can also be used to lift a little bit of paint as well. Because there's no paint on it, it's dry. And this will also show you why sometimes things can mess up when you're blending. So there's a bit of reflected light here. So I'm using the dry brush, really, really light pressure. It's just whispering across the surface. But if you don't have enough paint on your brush and you're blending like when you're painting normally, what can happen is through blending you end up lifting paint, and you lift too much paint. It's one of the reasons why I'm always trying to convince people to use more paint. One of the, as well as painting into outlines, one of the other, I would say, probably the most common problem in a lot of ways that I see with people's paintings is not using enough paint. A bit too far out over there, so I'll bring some more of them. Shadow in. A bit too light probably as well. So I'm in two minds about whether I'm going to paint in the shadows. You can actually paint in like darker shapes as well. I think I'm going to leave this one as more as like a pure wipeout. So if I wanted to suggest, you know, there's some light behind it here. If I wanted to suggest that, I've got to decide where I want this shadow to end. So what I won't do is draw in a line of where I think it is. I think it's going to be about here. And I'm going to use this brush to lift off some paint. Lift, wipe. And I'm creating the other side of the pumpkin, the shadow side of it here, not by actually painting the shadow at all, just by removing the paint from behind it. To just raise the value just a bit, not this much. It doesn't want to be anything like as light as the light side, because if you squint down, you can only just see this. But we're creating the shadow side, some definition of where the shadow side is by removing the value around it. And don't forget, while you're doing this, to keep stepping back and checking. Massively important. Stand back, squint, you know, get up. If you sit down when you paint, personally, I think it's a really good idea to have a chair on rollers, so you can scoot back. But, you know, or just get into the habit of getting out of the chair and standing back, you know, walking back and standing back every now and again. That's a good question. Do you have any health-related concerns about getting lead white on your fingers when doing a wipeout like this? I don't. I mean, what I always say about these kind of things is, you know, it's up to you to make your own decisions about what you feel safe with. Having done a fair amount of reading on this subject, I believe I'm not obviously a medical professional, sorry, so don't take my advice as as gospel at all. But I believe that you can't kind of ingest lead in lead white paint through your skin. You have to actually eat it, which obviously, you know, none of us are going to do, right? Who would want to eat lead white paint? So no, I don't worry about it over much. But I mean, a lot of people use gloves when they're painting, even if they're not using lead white. So everybody has a different level of tolerance, you know, for what they're prepared to accept, you know. But I don't deliberately go out of my way to get it on, on my fingers, though. You know, having said that, I don't worry over much about it. But you know, as I say, you must make your own decisions about what you're comfortable with. So gradually, bit by bit, I'm trying to refine where the left edge is, because the only thing that's showing the left edge of the squash is this bit here. Nothing's been painted here at all. But if I can get this right in about the right place, then you'll feel the rest of the squash, you know, without actually having to paint it. You'll feel that it's there. It's kind of like, it's almost like drawing without drawing. Drawing with no lines. And it's a very relaxing process as well. You know, if you can take your time with it. And you can get such fine variations of value that you know, just through wiping, that might actually be more difficult for you to get with actual paint. It's like it's a halfway house between drawing and painting. So quite often I'll do a wipeout like this and then paint over it in a second session. In fact, I've got one here that was done this way. This is a wipeout that was started the same way. It's a little bit sunken in now. This is off the last flower painting workshop. So all of this is thick opaque paint, and this is all opaque paint, but all of this is the wipeout still showing through, you know, and you can see parts of the wipeout through the petals. So you start off with a much more, I feel that it's kind of a more poetic way to start as well, a painting. I think this probably needs to go down a little bit further here. And you end up with all of this texture in there too, which is another really nice thing about wipeouts that helps the whole thing live a little bit more. It's like it solves, it's tricky because you need to be able to see shape well, and that does take practice, but it solves a lot of common problems in paintings. It stops you getting obsessed with the outline. Like, there is no outline here, and if I could persuade everybody who learns with me not to put outlines in areas like that, to see this as one shape, everybody's paintings would come together more. You know, you get a much stronger feeling of the reality of the space. So it stops you getting obsessed with painting outlines. You get into thinking in terms of shape instead of thinking in terms of outline. I need to add in a little bit more paint here and there, so I'm going to mix up a little bit more of my starting value. I mean, that's the biggest kind of advantage of it. Oh, one of the dogs is trying to break into the studio. Our big fella, our rescue teddy bear, Teddy the rescue. He's he's so lovely, but he likes to have someone around him a lot of the time. So I've got the position of these a bit wrong, so I'm painting over them, actually bringing back in the cast shadow cast by the stem. A bit too high here. This is a bit too high, and a bit too big, so I need to bring it in, bring it down. It's a bit better. Now I'm looking for little areas that are not quite right that I can improve. I'm going to lift a little bit more paint from this area here. And it does just kind of emerge. It's like you start with a shadow, like a mid-value shadow across the whole of the surface, and then gradually the form emerges. You pull it out of the surface, bit by bit. Oh, this is a bit coggly, isn't it? I haven't got that quite right. Mine is leaning over much too much. That's better. I want to work into this area where we go from the light into the shadow a little bit more. So I'm lifting a bit more paint and trying to keep that darker kind of stripe where it's like the diametric opposite of this little plane here, which faces towards the light. This one faces a little bit more away from the light, so it's darker. Yeah, trying to do this on oil painting, textured oil painting paper is a complete nightmare because you can't wipe off the lights, basically. It won't wipe off well enough. And you can't get this kind of nice... These Ampersand panels are perfect for it because they have just enough texture to hold the paint, but not so much that you can't wipe it off. So I think I was probably not too bad in my original light shape that I wiped out. The form is looking reasonably good, I think, now. Need to bring some more stronger lights in. That's not going to do it. So a bit of Q-tip. I'm going to dip it in my terps and wipe it off for the very lightest parts. you can work a huge amount of variety into the light shape once you've got it, the big shape established. It's also a very nice way of kind of making yourself work from the general to the specific, you know. Work on the big shapes first and then gradually refine them down. Yeah, I mean, for people who worry a lot about the toxic properties of oil paint, and I'm not criticizing you at all, you know, as I say, you need to make your own decisions about what you're comfortable with. You can use OMS, but I actually think OMS in some ways is worse than terps because you can't smell it. At least with terps you can smell it. So if you know if there's a lot of terps in the atmosphere in your room because you can smell it. With OMS you don't really know it's there. You can use titanium instead of lead white easily for this, and it works just as well. Bit by bit, out she comes. Hello, Arena, good to see you. Gabriel says, I've never started a painting this way before. I'll give it a go. Yeah, definitely give it a go. It's kind of like a halfway house between drawing and painting in a lot of ways. The best elements of both. You're just dealing with value as well. It's a lot like charcoal drawing, more like charcoal drawing than anything else, which can be, you know, hugely expressive. It's a very expressive way to start a painting, I feel. Just gradually refining the shapes. Still feel like this needs to come down a little bit more, like, and I can show a bit more of the left edge by removing the value around it rather than actually painting. So it's like negative shape drawing. It's, you know, a little bit like that. So I don't think should be that dark. Squinting, squinting. And sometimes I kind of, you know, I have done wipeouts where intending to paint over them when I haven't had the heart to paint over them because I'm so happy with how the wipeout has come out that I don't want to risk spoiling it by painting over it. That happens too. It's easier to see where this reflected light comes now. So I'm removing a bit and I'm wiping the brush. Remove a bit, wipe the brush. So you can remove a really small amount in a very subtle way like this. Or you can get something like a paint shaper out, you know, as I did before, and make an edge hard, you know, let's make this edge hard over here. And it really teaches you about the difference between a hard and a soft edge and how they feel and what effect they have in a painting, you know. All of this, like so much, which is so important in painting, edge quality, mass and form, value balance, all of this you can practice with the wipeout. So much that is crucial to being able to paint well is in just this, you know, what might seem a simple way to work. And it's actually better in a lot of ways that you don't have to deal with color. while you're doing it, because one of the problems of painting as well, one of the key problems I think, one of the key difficulties of painting is that you have to deal with so many things at once. And that's why value studies are so good. I like to think of them as like value and edge studies. And this is like value, edge and texture study. Put it on, take it off. Wax on, wax off. We've got a lump of dark value here, which is making the form read wrong there. I think I'm done. I think I'm probably done. What do you think? Would you do any more in it, or would you leave it here? You get all of this lovely texture as well. Yeah, Dastoon says, I love the idea of this exercise. I need to work on my values. I'm going to give it a shot. Yeah, do it. But don't expect that it will necessarily come out brilliant the first time. You know, it takes, as I say, it takes a little bit of practice. But, you know, simple or, you know, reasonably simple subjects like this, it's all one color, it's very light. The form is fairly easy to see. These are brilliant things to be doing this kind of exercise with. And you get like a sense of the feel of paint, pushing paint around and making it do things once you've put it on the surface. There's just so many good reasons for doing this kind of practice. And as I say, if you get very tense when you paint and you're very worried about, you know, whether what you paint is going to come out well, and equally if you don't want to waste too many materials on just practice pieces, you know, you can do something like this, spend a bit of time on it, and you know, say I wanted to use this panel for something else, or say like I would get really too precious with a painting. If you promise to yourself before you start, you know what's coming, right? That you're not going to keep it. Because the point of painting, right, the real point of painting, when you really boil it down, is not what you produce, it's not what you make, it's not having the thing. The thing is just, the painting is just evidence that you've been there. So I've been painting lately, like little plein air studies like this. I've got a few on here at the moment. You know, I like this little painting, but the point of that painting is the process of making it and being in the orchard when I painted this tree. Smelling the air, you know, being out there. Here's another one of our pond out the front. Plein air painting. You know, you don't need this. What you need is the experience of making it, of being in the process. So why not just save the panel for something else? It's also a really nice way to tone your panels as well. But you know, you can just take it off again when you're done. Gasp. I know, right? But this is the lovely thing about what I've just done, is that I spent, you know, what, about an hour on that, maybe-ish. Bit less, you know, really, because I was yakking a lot at the same time. But the point of it is the process. The point is the act of seeing and drawing and learning and growing. You know, that's why we do this stuff. The painting that we end up with at the end is just evidence that we were there. But you've got to, you know, sometimes you've got to, the thing is, you know, if you approach a painting knowing that you're going to do that at the end, it releases you. It releases you from needing to make a finished painting. Promise yourself every now and again, I mean, just try it once. Promise yourself that you're just going to be in the process, in the act of making something, and then you're going to take it away at the end. And if you get very kind of tight with your work and you want to get away from that, if you get too obsessed with trying to make finished paintings, and it makes you tense and unable to try things, promise yourself you're going to do it. Promise yourself you're going to take it away at the end. Okay. But I can always make another one. You know, the point of this for me was to be here with you and to spend an hour doing this thing. The point was not to have the painting, you know, that I can, or the drawing, or whatever you want to call it, you know, that I can have and then keep and then show to people. The point was the process. The point was being present with the painting, being present with the squash, even though it was a photo of the squash and not the actual squash. I do have the squash here. And now look, I've got a really lovely primed panel, toned, ready for doing some painting on. Yeah, that says like what you're going to do with another pumpkin painting anyway. I know, right? What are you going to do with it? Do another one. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session today. I hope it was useful. If you've never tried a wipeout like this, give it a go. It's really eye-opening. And if you find yourself too dependent on, like, you know, really careful drawing, and if you feel constricted by that when you come to do a painting, this is a great way to break that. Of course, you kind of want to keep it, you know. I mean, every now and again it's allowed. You don't have to wipe it off at the end. You know, you can keep it. That's allowed too. But this is really good practice as well. Okay. Thanks for coming, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the session today. I'm not sure if there will be another one next Friday. We'll wait and see, because I need to remake the schedule, because I sometimes find that if I'm doing one every Friday, as I did for quite a long time, can get a bit just get a bit run down, which we don't want. Wouldn't be good. And I'm about to start another workshop very soon, so we'll see. But I will be doing at least one every other week, and we'll see how we go. Just watch for the email, and if you want to make sure you don't miss any of these, in the description is a link to subscribe to my email list, and I always send out an email before we start. Okay? Thanks very much, everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.